Hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to look at the exam blueprint for the AWS Developer Associate qualification. So this is an important lecture because it's going to lay the groundwork for what we need to cover in this course in order for you to pass the exam. At the time of recording I actually sat and passed the exam yesterday, so it is all very fresh in my mind, which is really great for you because I can give you some of the best tips. Okay, so let's have a look at what the exam actually consists of. So there's 4 objectives within the exam. There's AWS Fundamentals, and this is worth 10% of the exam. There's Designing and Developing, that's worth 40% of the exam. There's Deployment and Security, which is worth 30% of the exam. And there's Debugging, which is worth 20% of the exam. Now I'm just going to switch over to my browser. Okay, so this is the AWS Certified Developer Associate level exam blueprint, and I just sat the exam yesterday, and there's something in particular I would like to point out to you about this exam blueprint while the exam is still fresh in my mind. If you go down to the introduction section and go to the 3rd bullet point, it talks specifically about the technologies that are involved in the exam. So there's Amazon Simple Storage Service, which is known as S3, Amazon DynamoDB, Amazon Simple Queue Service or SQS, Amazon Simple Notification Service or SNS, Amazon Simple Workflow Service SWS, AWS Elastic Beanstalk, and AWS CloudFormation. Now technologies such as relational database services or RDS, things like Redshift, which is Amazon's data warehousing solution, things like CloudFront, for example, even things like auto-scaling, they do not come up in the exam much at all, if at all. So what you really need to focus on are those technologies in bullet point 3, and that's what the majority of this course is going to be about. We're going to have a section on each technology, and we're going to go into depth what you need to know to pass the exam on each technology. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the exam itself. The exam is administered by a company called Criterion Online. In order to book the exam, just go to Amazon's website, so we'll do AWS Certified Developer. You click on the link and you click here to schedule an exam. This will open up the webassessor.com website, and it's in here that you need to create a WebAssessor account if you don't already have one, and then you log in and you register to do the exam. And the exam is done in a Criterion testing center, so hopefully there'll be one nearby you. Sometimes you do need to plan this in advance. Sometimes it can be a month ahead before a test is available. It really depends on where you live and what testing centers are around you. And if you have a look down here, it says take an online practice exam, and that will cost you $20 US. You can do that. I did that before sitting the exam myself, but that's because I didn't have any course to study from. And in this course we will have a load of quizzes and a load of questions that are very similar to the practice exam. So it's up to you if you really want to go out and spend that extra money on the practice exam, but if you do the quizzes in our course you will be well placed to pass this exam, as well as provided you complete all the course lectures as well. And just a couple of things about the exam. So the exam is 80 minutes in length. It consists of 55 multiple choice questions, and if you notice, if we go back here to the exam blueprint, it doesn't actually give you a pass mark, and the reason for that is AWS tend to change the pass mark depending on how students are going. Now I know a friend of mine actually got 65% and passed the exam, so if you aim for something like 70%, you will definitely pass this exam, but there is no official pass mark, which is a bit strange if you ask me, but there you go. So let's go through and have a look at the different, what makes up the different exams. So we had these 4 different sections. We had AWS Fundamentals, Designing and Developing, Deployment and Security, and Debugging. So in the AWS Fundamentals section, we're going to look at how to design cloud services, database concepts, planning and design, familiarity with architectural trade-offs such as high availability versus cost, RDS versus installing your own database on EC2, and then we're going to look at Amazon S3, Amazon Simple Workflows Service, Messaging, DynamoDB, AWS Elastic Beanstalk, AWS CloudFormation, and Elasticity and Scalability. It is interesting that it mentions there that RDS versus installing your own database on EC2. That didn't come up on my exam at all, but all the rest of those points did. If we move on to Domain 2, designing and developing, we've got configure an Amazon machine image and programming with the Amazon AWS APIs. Now this really brings into an important point. With the developer exam, this is about how you develop on the AWS platform. It's not actually testing your coding skills. So whether you're a Ruby developer, whether you're a PHP developer, a Python developer, a .NET developer, a Java developer, there's going to be no questions in the exam about individual lines of code from those languages. So you don't need to know any of those languages. You don't even need to be a developer really to pass the exam. What you just need to know is the core developmental concepts. So throughout the exam, my course is going to be geared around PHP on the AWS platform. That's because I come from a PHP background. If you don't know PHP, don't worry about it. You don't need to know it to pass the exam. You just need to know the core fundamentals. And I'm going to keep saying that again and again and again. People ask me, well, can we have an example of how to do this in Ruby, or can we have an example of how to do this in Python? It doesn't matter. That's not going to help you pass the exam. What's going to help you pass the exam is knowing the core fundamentals, and that's what this course is going to be about. Okay, so let's move on to the third domain. So we've got cloud security best practices, and then in that's also comes down to things like the shared security responsibility model that did come up in my exam, the AWS platform compliance, AWS security attributes, security services, AWS identity access management. Now IAM really does come up a lot in the exam. We're going to have a whole section on that. As well as Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. We're going to teach you how to build out your own virtual private cloud and how to deploy instances into it. And then it's different models, so CIA and AAA models, ingress and egress filtering, and which AWS services and features fit. And then we've got the debugging section of the course, which is just around general troubleshooting information and questions and best practices in debugging. And typically the debugging questions will relate to things like VPC, where you can't get an internet connection, or maybe something is not load balancing properly. I only had a couple of debugging questions in my exam, but we will focus on that as well. So that's it really for the exam blueprint. I'm going to, in the next section, just start you off on AWS from a 10,000 foot overview. If you've done the AWS Solutions Architect course, you don't need to worry about this section. It's more or less a rehash of that. But if you haven't done the other course and you've never used AWS before, or you don't know all the components, the 10,000 foot overview is a really good place to start, because it's going to give you an introduction to the platform and basically a brief summary of what each component on the platform does. So if you've got the time, join me in the next lecture, and if not, thank you.